I do not believe that many people would support this if they understood economics. However, it's not really their fault when you look at the UK, because in British schools they teach children about the importance of their LGBTs and the pronouns, but they don't focus about the less important stuff like how does the economy work, what is supply and demand, what is inflation. Because you see, in the mind of the more left-leaning type of people, they believe that inflation is caused by greedy corporations. The CEOs, in the middle of the night, they gather around and they decide to increase prices the next day. That's literally what they think, especially if you look at Twitter. In reality, however, inflation is caused by the government printing money. You see, the economy does function on supply and demand, and it does function on producing stuff and consuming stuff. So when you increase the numbers of consumers, but you do not increase the number of producers, you have inflation. Because there's less shit to go around and people are desperate and they're willing to pay more for it. Regardless of what that shit is. Like, for example, cooking oil in Germany used to cost 10 times that amount during the pandemic. Because you couldn't find it. It was a rarity. Despite the fact that it was the same cooking oil you have now and the same cooking oil that existed 10 years ago, it increased in price simply because there was less people producing it but more people consuming it. So when you give free money to people that do not produce but only consume, you're going to have inflation. So this money is not going to come from thin air. The government is going to probably charge the taxpayer in order to afford to pay it to other people. And at the same time, those people are going to increase their consumption rate, which will end with inflation. So I don't see who would support this plan. Now, the only way that basic income would work is if you manage to increase the production. So let's say you have robots, you have AI. We go back to the age of the Roman Empire, where you have a class of people called the plebeians that couldn't find jobs because the Roman Empire had slaves. And they were getting free circus and food in order to keep them content. Now, if instead of slavery you're going to have AI and you're going to have robots, then yeah, sure, it would make sense that you're going to give people a universal basic income. But I don't think they're doing it because of this. If you read what's happening behind the doors, and actually it's not even behind the doors, it's like open in the public. They're talking about it, especially at the European Union, at the United Nations, at the IMF. They're talking about the central bank digital currency, the Chinese system, if you will. And one way to entice people to start using the digital currency is with the universal basic income. Now, the digital currency, the way I understand works, is that you will not be able to actually get cash withdrawn, right? That's why it's called digital. So you're going to have like your digital wallet that is connected to your digital ID, that's connected to your health status and all the other things that are put together. Basically, like your entire identity is being placed on this thing, and it's connected to your digital wallet. Now, as I mentioned before, you can't withdraw money from your digital wallet, but what you can do with it is you can spend it on things, and it's completely tracked. Like every transaction that you do is tracked to your name. They know exactly where you bought, what you do with the money, and they also have control over it. So, for example, if they so choose, they can not allow you to buy electronics. So it can be like central bank digital currency only for food, only for electronics, only for traveling with the public transportation system, so on and so forth. Like they would have complete control. And on top of that, if you, let's say, commit a violation, you do hate speech online, you run over a red light, then the money is automatically taken away from your central bank digital currency account. You don't have to actually go to a police officer. You don't have to file anything. Like the money is just literally taken away. You have absolutely no control over it. You're pretty much like a user that has access to the account, but in reality, it's not really your money because you can't do whatever you want with it. They can also increase the taxing for you. So for instance, if you buy too much things that cost carbon, or you allow the air conditioning to run too much, then when you purchase additional meat or you use the air conditioning additionally, then it can tax you even more. And if they use the Chinese model, this is what China does, they don't allow you to hoard the wealth, right? Because you endanger the interests of the merchant class. So basically what they do then is kind of like a coupon. Right? If you do not spend the money within a couple of days, then they take it out of your account. So this is a system that they want people to use, and as you can see, it's a lot of disadvantages. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong with it, but they want people to use it. So how do they do it? Well, they start with the universal basic income. Like, I'm willing to bet that if this system gets actually implemented, it will be under a central bank digital currency system. And they also talk about, by the way, they actually mentioned this in an article. The Bank of England talked about how the central bank digital system has an advantage that it allows the employer to decide what the employee spends money on. So this is like going back to the factory settings, back in the Industrial Revolution, where you had like the factory and it had like a little city around it. And probably it was like a 15-minute city, and they decided exactly what people were allowed and weren't allowed to buy, because everything around that area belonged to the factory. So we could be moving back to that. I mean, people lived during those ages. Like, why not? Work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's very productive. But still, the whole thing with the universal basic income, the thing that scares me the most, is that they're talking about how the researchers themselves want to use this in order to prove that the system works, right? So, like, they're not doing an experiment to see whether or not it can work. No, like, they want to show that it works. And, a researcher shouldn't have this level of bias before performing an experiment. It reminds me a lot about creationists, which also had science and their own experiments, but they always wanted to arrive to the conclusion that the Earth is 6,000 years old. And for some goddamn reason, they always ended up to that particular conclusion, regardless of the experiment. So this is something that should be an alarm sign when the researcher wants to do an experiment not to find out the truth, but they already have their conclusions, and they want to perform the experiment in order to arrive to the correct conclusion. That's not science, by the way. But what's also interesting is that the short-term experiment may not work long-term. The perfect example with this is people who wanted to work from home. And I remember like talking to someone before the pandemic, and I was saying like, dude, you cannot work from home because you do not have a strict schedule. You cannot discipline yourself enough. You have a family that's noisy, and they didn't care about what I said. And then the pandemic happens, and he has to work from home, and he realizes that, yeah, he can't actually wake up one time, his family was too loud, and he makes a Facebook post describing how he is suffering from burnout. Especially psychologically speaking, like when you associate your workplace with your home, things don't go as well, right? Like usually the workplace is where you go to work and it has like one image in your mind, and it's usually not necessarily a positive one. And then you have your home, which should be a positive environment. You're going there to relax. But when you mix these two up, it may create discomfort. Now, I made it potentially clear that I'm talking about certain groups of people. Like some people like myself love to work from home and are used to working from home. But other people do not have the mental strength, the mental fortitude, the discipline required in order to push themselves to have like a specific timetable to do the activities required so that they can fulfill the work on time. And initially, like in the first couple of months of the pandemic, they loved working from home. And everyone did, right? And that's what the experiment showed. Yeah, like people are more productive when they work from their own homes, and they're more happy, right? But as time moves on and you go back and you look at what happened, like after the first 3 months, and the fact that they had to constantly be in the same environment, they didn't left their houses, they didn't meet people, it caused them to become burnout, to get depressed, to become less productive. And this is what I also worried about these studies. Like sure, paying people £1,600 a month for a period of time may work, but will it work forever? And it's also the question, it's like, what will happen to minimum wage? I mean, why would people work for minimum wage at this point? You can stay home, do nothing, and get £1,600. Or you can go to work, and after taxes, you may end up with a similar amount. So if I'm a company that, let's say, has a small cafe, like one of those little kiosks that just require one person there, and I want to hire a barista, how much do you think I should pay them so that my business is also profitable? Do I have to pay them £5,000 now? Like, do you see what's going to happen? Do you not see the inflation that's around the corner? Probably not. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.